To Christians, life on earth is sacred, as it is a gift from God. This is one of the critical factors which inclines Christians to hold human rights so close to their beliefs. Anything to degrade or harm human life would be disrespectful towards God, as He gave us a gift that we call life. The Bible emphasizes that man is like God due to their ability to reason and have moral conscience. Moral reasoning is the ability to think about the well-being of others and to interpret information to decide what the best action is. Christianity holds the views of healthcare and education very close to them, as looking out for the future and livelihood of one another is part of the Christian belief. One of the more critical values in the Christian religion is generosity. Generosity is a readiness to give more of something, such as money or time, than is strictly necessary or expected. Many individuals took these values and carried them with them throughout life. Individuals would put the needs and safety of others before their own well-being. Another centric value of the Christian religion is peace. The religion relies on impression that peace is a gift from God and that it should be sacred and preserved. Peace should always be a priority for the Christian individual, as quoted in Romans 14:19. Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. Since the 18th century, some Christians in the United States have used the Bible to fight for equality, religious freedom, and human rights. The Christian religion was prominent in the early days of America. From the first groups of settlers in the 17th century, Christianity has made its way to the New World. The religion continued to spread throughout America, with many denominations of Christianity popping up, continuously growing. Throughout the different regions of the New World dating to the 17th century, there were Puritans, Anglicans, Catholicism, and many more denominations of Christianity. With all sects of Christianity, the freedom of religion became a top priority in the 18th century for many influential American icons. James Madison was fascinated during the younger years of his life with stories regarding Elijah Craig, a Baptist preacher arrested for not having an Anglican license. When Madison heard of this, he realized that an established state religion directly denied individuals freedom of rights. Madison committed himself to fight for religious liberty, and in 1776 became a delegate to the Virginia Convention and assisted in writing the Declaration of Independence. One of Madison's most extensive contributions here was the objection to the phrase "foolish toleration" and urged the legislature to recognize the term "free exercise" when discussing the topic of religion. Madison also urged the legislature to end the state support for the Anglican Church, which was an argument he did not win. However, what came from the discussion was the phrase "all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion," which would be adopted by the Virginia Constitution. Madison also influenced the Bill of Rights. In June 1789, he introduced a series of amendments to Congress. These amendments went on to become the core of the Bill of Rights. In his notes to the amendment, Madison can be quoted saying, "The civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of the conscience be in any manner or any pretext infringed." Madison's dedication to protecting individual religious freedoms and rights helped this country build its foundations, which are still intact today. During slavery, abolitionists used the Bible as a reference, demanding that all be created equal and all should be treated fairly. As to God, everyone is the same. All humans are made in the image of God, which was the abolitionist argument for the dissolution of slavery. Christianity was a prominent feature for both enslavers and anti-slavery activists. To effectively persuade individuals against slavery, the abolitionists used ideas from the Bible and Christian practices, combined with the American patriotic ideals, to influence the decision around slavery. One of the most prominent figures for using Christian teachings to abolish slavery was Angelina Grimke. Angelina was a Christian who in 1836 wrote The Appeal to Christian Women of the South. The text regarded the practice of slavery and the moral and ethical issues involved. Throughout the text, Grimke can be quoted saying, "I know that this doctrine of obeying God rather than man will be considered as dangerous and heretical by many, but I am not afraid openly to avow it, because it is the doctrine of the Bible. But I would not be understood to advocate resistance to any law, however oppressive, if in obeying it I was not obliged to sin. If, for instance, there was a law which imposed imprisonment or a fine upon me if I manumitted an enslaved person, I would on no account resist that law. I on their feet voice an opinion, and successfully run an organization. If a law commends me to sin, I will break it. If it calls me to suffer, I will let it take its course unrestingly. The doctrine of the blind obedience and unqualified submission to any human power, whether civil or ecclesiastical, is the doctrine of despotism and ought to have no place among Republicans or Christians. In this quote, Grimke describes the difficulties one must face when the law of man conflicts with the law of God, including the word sin carries a direct connotation and disobedience to God, which all Christians avoid. Grimke argues that it is an absurd thought that we can enslave individuals in free America. Grimke published her work knowing that she could face harsh backlash since slavery was still favored in the South. In many cases, it was punishable for discussing the abolition of slavery. Christians have used the Bible and its moral code to impact the society around them and encourage a change towards equality for all. Women are created in the eyes of God, which was an arguing point for those in favor of equal rights and voting rights for women. This was the argument that Frances Willard used to fight for women's equality. Frances Willard was born into a devout Methodist family in 1839. Willard wanted to end women's suffrage and believed she could do this through Christianity. In 1874, Willard formed the Women's Christian Temperance Union. It was a proponent of women's suffrage, using its platform as a voice for women's equality. Regardless of religious or ideological discrepancies between women's rights activists, the WCTU values to righteousness and women's rights is undisputable, as the organization has helped prepare women in reform movements to react to adversities and think on their own feet and voice their own opinion. All of this has led to the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. One of the most prominent Christian figures fighting and promoting equality was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was at the forefront of the fight for civil rights and used Christian teachings during his speeches to motivate and influence his audience. Dr. King was a Baptist reverend at Montgomery Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. During King's time in the Birmingham jail, he wrote a letter referencing God and the roots that America was founded on. The quote from the letter is as follows. How does one determine when a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law and the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. An unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal and natural law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. Dr. King believed that all individuals should be granted the same rights and was a voice for many African Americans. He fought for justice and he fought for the dignity of others. King realized he could use his platform to make a difference in the world and did not care about the consequences that he faced. He was a man who was very unselfish. King was arrested multiple times for his activism and continued to write letters while in prison. Individuals all over the country were motivated by King's efforts. Dr. King makes sure to always urge for nonviolent movement as this relates to his Christian beliefs. Nelson Mandela was another human rights activist who used their Christian beliefs to push for equality. During his childhood, Mandela went to a Methodist boarding school which taught him the values of Christianity. At this time, the only way a black child could get a proper education in South Africa was at one of these Methodist boarding schools. This was Mandela's first interaction with religion and set him down a path that he would follow for life. During one of his speeches later in life, Mandela had a quote saying, "Without the church, without the religious institutions, I would have never been here today." Mandela had been instilled with the Christian ways and the ability to become a leader through three specific Methodist ministers that he met while growing up: Reverend Matoyo, Reverend Harris, and Reverend Mokitimi. After experiencing unjust treatment during his childhood, Mandela moved to Johannesburg, and in 1942 Mandela joined the African National Congress. The ANC was an anti-apartheid movement fighting for rights for more than 80% of South African population who were affected by segregation and racism. In 1956, Mandela was imprisoned and accused of treason. However, he was acquitted in 1961 after many violent demonstrations. Later in 1961, Mandela helped form the Umkhonto we Sizwe, which would revolt against unjust government policies. Shortly after this, Mandela was arrested and sentenced to life in prison for conspiracy to overthrow the government. However, in prison, Mandela continued to learn about the Christian religion and the importance of human rights. In 1990, Mandela was promised to be released by the jail from new president F.W. de Klerk. The new president said that they would phase out apartheid, and Mandela and de Klerk continued to discuss negotiations. After his release, Mandela went on an international tour to persuade other countries to support sanctions against South Africa's apartheid government. Apartheid was dissolved and ended in a series of negotiations between Mandela and de Klerk from 1990 to 1993. They finally decided on a multiracial election in 1994 in which Mandela was elected president of the country. Mandela had succeeded in becoming a leader and was now presented with the opportunity to enforce change and equality. Through the ideas of the Methodist belief from when he was young, Mandela always believed in the importance of human rights and equality. As Mandela grew, he held these values close to him and fought for equality for South Africa. As a result, Mandela was able to unite a country that was severely divided at the start of his life. Mandela continued to preserve and dedicate his life to improving living conditions of others who could not fight for themselves. This unselfishness has a significant relation to his Christian teachings during his youth.